97 days. That's how long it had been since I watched my sister present my entire business model to her fiancé's family, as if it were her own creation. 97 days since I sat across the dinner table, stunned into silence, as 5 years of my work was claimed by someone who had never designed a single product. My name is Olivia. I'm 32, and my sister Rebecca just might be the most ruthless entrepreneur I've ever met, except she's never actually built anything of her own. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Family dinners at my parents' house had always been an exercise in patience. My mother's barely concealed disappointment in my hobby business, as she called it, my father's dismissive questions about when I'd get a real job with benefits, and my younger sister Rebecca's talent for redirecting any positive attention that might accidentally come my way. But this particular Sunday dinner in late March was different. This time the stakes were exponentially higher, though I wouldn't realize just how high until dessert was served. I arrived 15 minutes early, as usual, balancing a homemade apple pie on one hand while juggling my phone with the other. 3 notifications from Shopify alerted me to new orders. The 5th consecutive day my handcrafted sustainable home goods had sold out within hours of restocking. After 2 years of barely breaking even, my business had finally found its footing. The feature in Mindful Living magazine the previous month had created the tipping point I'd been working toward since quitting my corporate design job to launch Hearth and Home Sustainable Living. "Olivia, you're early," my mother sighed as she opened the door, her tone suggesting this was an inconvenience rather than a courtesy. "Rebecca and James aren't here yet, and I've told you I don't need help in the kitchen." I swallowed the automatic apology that rose to my lips. At 32, I was working on breaking the habit of apologizing for things that weren't actually problems. "The pie needs to cool anyway," I replied instead, moving past her to the kitchen. "And I brought those beeswax food wraps you mentioned wanting to try." My mother followed, eyeing the colorfully patterned fabric squares I placed on the counter. "These are the things you're selling? They're just fabric with wax?" "Sustainable alternatives to plastic wrap," I explained, though we'd had this conversation at least 3 times before. "They're reusable for about a year, completely compostable afterward, and I source all the cotton from organic fair trade suppliers." She replied noncommittally, returning to the roast she was preparing. "Rebecca says James's family is very successful in commercial real estate. His father owns half the new development downtown." And there it was, the pivot to Rebecca. Some things were predictable as gravity. "That's nice," I replied, busying myself with arranging the pie on a cooling rack. Rebecca, 2 years younger at 30, had always been the family favorite. Where I was thoughtful and methodical, she was vivacious and spontaneous. While I spent weekends researching sustainable materials and perfecting production processes, Rebecca spent hers at networking events and charity galas. Her career in pharmaceutical sales had all the external markers of success my parents valued: expense account lunches, company car, impressive title. The doorbell rang at precisely 5 p.m. My father shuffled from his study to answer it, his reading glasses perched on top of his head. "There's my girl!" I heard him exclaim, followed by Rebecca's melodious laugh. The contrast with his subdued, "Hello, Olivia," when I'd arrived, wasn't lost on me. Rebecca swept into the kitchen like a perfumed hurricane, designer dress fluttering, diamond earrings catching the light. Behind her walked a tall man with thoughtful eyes and a slightly reserved smile. "Mom, Liv, this is James," Rebecca announced, though she'd been dating him for 6 months and had shown us enough photos that we could have picked him out of a lineup. James stepped forward, extending his hand first to my mother, then to me. "It's wonderful to finally meet you both. Rebecca speaks so highly of her family." There was something genuine in his handshake, a firmness without aggression, confidence without arrogance. His eyes met mine directly, assessing rather than dismissing, I found myself wondering how someone so apparently authentic had ended up with my sister, whose relationship with the truth had always been more flexible than yoga instructor. Olivia has a little online shop selling eco-friendly things, Rebecca informed him, her tone making it sound like I was running a lemonade stand rather than a business that had just passed $300,000 in annual revenue. It's not actually little anymore, I corrected mildly. We're projecting to hit $500,000 this year, and we've just been approached about wholesale partnerships with 3 national retailers. Rebecca's smile tightened imperceptibly. My mother looked between us, sensing potential conflict and moving swiftly to diffuse it. Dinner's almost ready. Rebecca, why don't you open the wine James brought? Olivia, set the table, please. As I arranged cutlery and napkins, I could hear Rebecca in the adjacent dining room, voice pitched to carry just enough for me to hear. James, wait until you meet my parents' neighbors on Friday. The husband is on the board of Crestview Development. I mentioned your family's interest in sustainable commercial properties, and he was very intrigued. The familiar sensation of being simultaneously present and invisible washed over me. Rebecca had always had an uncanny ability to absorb information I shared and repurpose it for her own advancement. The sustainable commercial properties angle was clearly gleaned from conversations where I'd explained my business ethics to our family, usually to disinterested expressions. Dinner proceeded predictably. My father interrogated James about his family's business, while my mother clucked approvingly at Rebecca's anecdotes about her latest pharmaceutical conference. I answered the obligatory questions about my little project with as much enthusiasm as I could muster, highlighting the recent press coverage and growing sales figures. That's nice, dear, my mother replied absently before turning back to Rebecca. Now tell us more about the charity gala you're helping organize. James's mother is on the committee, isn't she? The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone, occasionally acknowledging my presence before continuing on its preferred course. It wasn't until dessert, my homemade apple pie served with careful indifference by my mother, that the evening truly unraveled. James's parents are joining us for dinner Friday, my mother announced, serving the first slice to my father. They're coming into town for the weekend to look at potential properties and to meet us, of course. Actually, James added, his gaze including me in a way the conversation generally hadn't. My mother is particularly interested in meeting you, Olivia. Rebecca's been telling us about your business model and philosophy. The sustainability focus aligns with direction my family's company has been exploring for our new developments. I blinked in surprise, both at being directly addressed and at the content of his statement. That's wonderful. I'm happy to discuss it. I turned to Rebecca, whose expression had frozen in a rictus smile. I didn't realize you'd been talking about my business with James's family. Oh, yes, James continued, oblivious to the sudden tension. Rebecca's been sharing your business plan with my parents for weeks now. Your approach to ethical sourcing while maintaining profitability is exactly what we've been looking to implement in our residential developments. My fork stilled halfway to my mouth. My business plan? Rebecca jumped in smoothly. I've just been telling them about some ideas I've been working on, inspired by different things I've observed in the market. Rebecca's concept for a fully integrated sustainable living product line that could be featured in our new eco-focused residential community is fascinating, James continued enthusiastically. The market analysis she presented showing the growing demand for accessible sustainability solutions was incredibly thorough. The room seemed to tilt slightly as I processed his words. Market analysis, business plan. These weren't vague concepts Rebecca had observed in the market. These were the exact components of the business strategy I had developed over 5 painstaking years, refining each element through research, trial and error, and countless sleepless nights. I looked directly at my sister, whose eyes now held a warning glare. Rebecca, I said carefully, these sound remarkably similar to the business materials I showed you last month when you asked about my growth strategy. Well, obviously I was inspired by some of what you're doing with your crafts, she replied dismissively. But the comprehensive business approach and market positioning are my concepts. My parents exchanged glances. My father cleared his throat, uncomfortably, while my mother jumped in with forced brightness. Rebecca has always had a wonderful head for business. Even as a child, she was selling her toys at a profit while Olivia was giving hers away. I wasn't giving them away, I corrected, quietly. I was repairing broken toys from the neighborhood kids and returning them. It wasn't about profit. Exactly, Rebecca seized on this. That's always been the difference between us. I see the market potential where Olivia sees a hobby. James looked between us, confusion beginning to register in his expression. The business plan mentioned your hands-on product development background, Rebecca. I thought you said you'd been developing these sustainable products for years. A flush crept up Rebecca's neck. I've been developing the concept. The actual products are just execution details. Execution details? The words escaped me before I could contain them. Rebecca, you've never designed or created a single sustainable product in your life. The business plan, market analysis, sourcing, strategy, and product line you're describing are exactly what I've built with Hearth and Home over the past 5 years. The table fell into uncomfortable silence. My father studied his pie with sudden intensity. My mother's smile had become brittle at the edges. Rebecca's eyes flashed with a familiar mixture of defiance and calculation. Only James looked genuinely dismayed, his gaze moving between Rebecca and me with growing comprehension. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Rebecca finally said, reaching for James's hand. Olivia makes some lovely craft items that certainly inspired some of my thinking, but the business strategy I've been discussing with your parents is entirely my own development. I sat there, fork still suspended midair, faced with a familiar crossroads. I could back down as I always had, allowing Rebecca to claim credit for my work to preserve family peace. Or I could finally stand my ground, even knowing the familial consequences. The decision crystallized with unexpected clarity. Setting down my fork with deliberate calm, I turned to James. I'd be happy to show you my original business plan, complete with development timeline, market analysis, and growth projections. The file properties will show they were created 3 years ago and last modified when I shared them with Rebecca last month. I can also show you the profile in Mindful Living magazine that features my workshop and product development process. Rebecca's face drained of color. Olivia, you're being ridiculous. Just because you make some beeswax wraps and bamboo utensils doesn't mean you invented sustainable living. No, but I did create the specific sustainable living business model you're presenting as your own, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Including the 3-phase market expansion strategy and the community integration approach that James just mentioned. James withdrew his hand from Rebecca's, his expression hardening. Rebecca, is this true? Have you been presenting Olivia's business as your concept? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Of course not, Rebecca protested. But the artificial tremor in her voice was one I recognized from childhood, the same affected quaver she'd used when claiming I had broken things. She had actually damaged herself. James, you know me. I would never do something like that. My mother intervened, her tone conciliatory but aimed entirely in Rebecca's defense. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding between sisters. Olivia, Rebecca has always been supportive of your crafting. I'm certain she was just trying to help promote your work to James's family. By claiming it as her own? I asked quietly. That's not support, Mom. That's appropriation. My father finally looked up from his studious examination of his dessert. Now, Olivia, there's no need for accusations. Rebecca was probably just excited about your success and got carried away explaining it. The familiar dynamic was unfolding, exactly as it always had. Rebecca created the problem. I identified it, and somehow I was positioned as the unreasonable one for not accepting the situation. But something had changed. Perhaps the 90-hour work weeks I'd put into building my business, or perhaps the simple fact that I'd finally built something too significant to let someone else claim. Whatever the cause, I found myself unwilling to play my usual role. I've worked too hard building this business to watch it be presented as someone else's concept, I said, standing up. James, I apologize for this awkward situation, but I want to be clear. The sustainable living business model Rebecca has been discussing with your family is my creation, not hers. Every element of it, from the ethical sourcing framework to the community integration strategy, represents years of my professional work. Rebecca stood as well, tears now strategically glistening in her eyes. I can't believe you're doing this right now, Olivia. This is exactly why I never tell people we're related in professional settings. You always find a way to make everything about you. Rebecca, James said quietly, his tone bringing an immediate halt to her gathering tirade. Is what Olivia's saying true? The ensuing silence answered his question more definitively than words could have. Rebecca's expression cycled, rapidly through indignation, calculation, and finally a manufactured vulnerability. I may have emphasized my involvement more than was strictly accurate, she admitted finally, her voice small. But I was only trying to find connections that could benefit both of us. By claiming my work as your own? I asked. By finding investors who could take your little business to the next level, Rebecca snapped, the facade cracking. You think you can scale nationally with your one-woman operation in a converted garage? You need connections like James's family. Connections I could have made myself if introduced honestly, I pointed out. Instead, you've presented yourself as the business owner, which means any partnership would be with you, not me. James stood abruptly. I think I should go. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Chen, thank you for dinner. He turned to me. Olivia, I apologize for the misunderstanding. I'd still be interested in discussing your actual business, if you're willing. James, Rebecca protested, reaching for his arm. You can't be serious. It's just a silly misunderstanding about a hobby business. The look he gave her contained equal parts disappointment and reassessment. A misunderstanding implies confusion, Rebecca. This seems quite deliberate. He turned. Back to me. May I have your business card? I'd like to schedule a proper meeting. With slightly shaking hands, I retrieved a card from my wallet and handed it to him. The embossed logo of Hearth and Home Sustainable Living caught the light as he tucked it carefully into his jacket pocket. I'll call you this week, he said with a nod, before turning to leave. Rebecca rushed after him, their heated whispers audible, from the hallway as my mother began clearing dishes with pointed clattering. I hope you're satisfied, she said tightly once we heard the front door close. You've embarrassed your sister in front of her boyfriend's family now. Rebecca embarrassed herself by lying, I replied, gathering dessert plates to help clear despite my mother's obvious anger. And this isn't about satisfaction. It's about 5 years of my work being claimed by someone else. My father sighed, heavily. Olivia, you know how important this relationship is to Rebecca. The Palmer family could open doors for her career, for all of us. Surely you could have addressed this privately instead of creating a scene. The familiar feeling of invisibility descended again. My work, my boundaries, my professional integrity all secondary to Rebecca's social climbing and my parents' vicarious aspirations. But this time, the feeling was accompanied by a new clarity. I didn't have to participate in this dynamic anymore. I didn't have to minimize myself to maximize Rebecca's comfort. I need to go, I said quietly, gathering my purse. Thank you for dinner. Olivia, don't be dramatic, my mother sighed. Sit down. Your father and I want to discuss how we're going to fix this situation before the dinner with the Palmers, on Friday. I paused at the doorway, a lifetime of conditioning urging me to comply, to sit, to participate in whatever damage control my parents deemed necessary to preserve Rebecca's opportunity. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and spoke with calm I didn't entirely feel. There's nothing to fix from my perspective. Rebecca presented my business as her own. James now knows the truth. What happens next is between them. I turned to leave, then added, and I won't be attending dinner on Friday. I have inventory to restock and wholesale contracts to review. My mother's expression registered shock at this unprecedented defiance. My father began to rise, his face reddening, with the beginning of a lecture. But for once, I didn't stay to receive it. I walked out the front door, passing Rebecca, who was sitting alone on the porch steps, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "He left," she said accusingly as I passed. "Are you happy now?" I stopped, looking down at my sister, beautiful, manipulative. Rebecca, who had always found it easier to claim things than to create them. "No," I answered honestly. "I'm not happy that you tried to steal my business. I'm not happy that our parents are still enabling behavior that would be considered fraud in any professional context. And I'm not happy that I had to publicly defend work that represents the last 5 years of my life." "It wasn't like that," she insisted, though without her usual conviction. "I was just trying to make connections that could help both of us. Connections where you were positioned as the founder and visionary behind my company," I pointed out. "That doesn't help me, Rebecca. That erases me." She looked away, unable or unwilling to acknowledge the simple truth. In the gathering twilight, I could see the little sister who had always believed that wanting something was justification enough for taking it, whether it was my clothes, my achievements, or now my business. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked, a note of genuine fear entering her voice. "James wants to meet with you about investing in your company. Are you going to turn his family against me?" The question revealed so much about how Rebecca viewed the world, as a zero-sum game where my success would necessarily mean her failure. It had never occurred to her that we might both succeed in different ways, that there might be enough recognition and opportunity for both of us. "I'm going to run my business," I answered simply. "I'm going to meet with potential investors who value what I've built. And I'm going to stop diminishing myself to make you feel bigger." I continued down the steps and walked to my car, ignoring her calls behind me. As I drove away from my parents' house, a strange lightness began to replace the familiar weight of family obligation and expected self-sacrifice. For the first time, I had defended my creation without apologizing for taking up space. I had refused to participate in the family script that always cast me as supporting character in Rebecca's starring role. My phone began buzzing with texts. Almost immediately, Rebecca's alternating between accusations and tearful pleas, my mother's expressing disappointment in my behavior, my father's demanding I apologize before Friday's dinner. I silenced the notifications and drove toward home, toward the converted garage workshop where I had built something authentic and meaningful while no one in my family was paying attention. That night, as I prepared orders for shipping and updated inventory records, a new message appeared on my phone, an unknown number that turned out to be James Palmer. "Olivia, this is James. I'd like to formally apologize for the misunderstanding tonight. I'm impressed by what I've learned about your business and would appreciate the opportunity to discuss it properly, without intermediaries. My family's investment group is genuinely interested in sustainable business models like yours. Please let me know if you'd be willing to meet this week." I stared at the message for a long moment, considering the implications. This was the connection Rebecca had been attempting to secure for herself. Legitimate investor interest that could potentially take Hearth and Home to the national scale I'd been working toward. With steady hands, I typed my response. "Thank you. James, I appreciate your directness. I'd be happy to meet and discuss potential collaboration. My workshop is open all day Wednesday if you'd like to see the operation firsthand before we talk specifics. His response came quickly. Wednesday works perfectly. Looking forward to seeing the real Hearth and Home. Setting down my phone, I ran my fingers over the smooth bamboo cutting board I was preparing to ship. One of our best-selling products, crafted from sustainable materials by my own hands. 5 years ago, I had left a prestigious design position to build something I believed in, despite my family's disapproval and dismissal. Tonight, I had finally defended that creation with the same conviction I had used to build it. As I continued, preparing the next day's shipments, I realized that the confrontation at dinner had shifted something fundamental in my understanding of both my business and myself. Hearth and Home wasn't just a company I had created. It was the physical manifestation of my values, my persistence, and my vision. In defending it against appropriation, I had finally claimed not just my work, but my worth. The dinner that had begun as another exercise in familial tolerance had unexpectedly become the moment I fully stepped into ownership of my creation. Rebecca had inadvertently given me the opportunity to articulate exactly why my business mattered, not just as a commercial enterprise, but as an extension of my authentic self. 97 days later, I would look back on that Sunday dinner as the catalyzing moment that transformed both my business and my self-perception. The confrontation that had seemed catastrophic in the moment had actually been the necessary breaking point, the clean fracture that allowed for proper healing and alignment. But that evening, packaging sustainable products in my workshop with my phone silenced against the family crisis unfolding in my message inbox, all I knew was that something had shifted irreversibly. I had finally refused to make myself smaller to accommodate someone else's deception. I had defended my creation. And in doing so, I had begun to create something new, a version of myself that didn't require external validation to recognize her own value. I'd always been the practical sister. While Rebecca collected accolades and attention, I collected knowledge and skills. My journey to entrepreneurship hadn't been a dramatic pivot or a visionary epiphany. It had been a gradual, awakening to the disconnect between my values and my daily work. 5 years before that fateful family dinner, I had been sitting in a sleek corporate boardroom, presenting sustainable packaging designs to executives who nodded appreciatively, while simultaneously planning to choose the cheapest option regardless of environmental impact. It was my 3rd year as a senior product designer at Meridian Brands, a company that marketed itself as eco-conscious, while its supply chain told a different story. These bamboo alternatives would reduce plastic waste by approximately 70% across our personal care line, I explained, displaying the prototypes I had spent months developing. The initial production cost is slightly higher, but consumer research indicates willingness to pay the 8% premium for sustainable packaging, and manufacturing costs will decrease as we scale. The VP of Marketing, Trevor, nodded enthusiastically. Love the aesthetic, Olivia. Very on trend with the earthy minimalism consumers want right now. It's not just aesthetic, I clarified. The structural design eliminates the need for mixed materials, making it fully compostable. Yes, all good points for the marketing copy, Trevor interrupted. Let's definitely highlight the eco angle. Millennials eat that stuff up. The VP of Operations, Margaret, was more direct. These cost projections seem optimistic. Our shareholders expect quarterly improvements, not long-term sustainability. Gambles. The familiar knot of frustration tightened in my stomach. 3 years of pushing for meaningful changes, of developing genuinely sustainable alternatives, only to have them reduced to marketing points or rejected for quarterly profit margins. I had entered product design to create solutions that mattered, not to design deceptive green packaging for fundamentally unsustainable products. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the prototypes rejected by Meridian, bamboo containers, mycelium packaging, seed-embedded paper, tangible representations of a better approach. My phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. A college friend had started making beeswax food wraps in her kitchen and selling them at local farmers markets. Her caption read, "Small Business Month 3, broke even for the first time." Turns out people actually want alternatives to plastic. Wrap, sustainability, small business. Something clicked as I scrolled through her photos. The genuine enthusiasm from customers, the direct impact of each sale, the alignment between values and work. I thought about the corporate sustainability initiatives I'd championed at Meridian, all diluted or discarded before implementation. Then I looked again at my prototypes, at 5 years of professional knowledge about sustainable materials and design methodologies. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I created the first business plan for what would become Hearth and Home Sustainable Living, a comprehensive outline for developing everyday products that made sustainability accessible to average households. Not luxury items for the eco-elite, but pragmatic replacements for common disposable products, food storage solutions, kitchen tools, cleaning supplies. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my director at Meridian. "A sabbatical?" she repeated, eyebrows raised. "You're on track for the design director position next year, Olivia. This isn't the time to step away." "I know," I acknowledged, "but I need to explore something different. 6 months, unpaid. If it doesn't work out, I'd hope to return." She studied me with the shrewd assessment that had made her successful in corporate environments. "This is about the bamboo packaging rejection, isn't it? You need to understand that business decisions—" "It's about more than one rejection," I interrupted, surprising both of us with my directness. "It's about realizing I spend more time convincing people to care about sustainability than actually creating sustainable solutions." 2 weeks later, I cleared out my desk, converted my home office into a product development space, and took the terrifying leap from corporate security to entrepreneurial uncertainty. The sabbatical was my safety net, a way to test my concept without immediately burning bridges. The early months were a chaotic blur of research, prototyping, testing, and market analysis. I liquidated most of my savings to purchase initial equipment and materials. My dining table became a production facility, my living room a shipping department. I slept less than during the most demanding corporate deadlines, but woke with an energy I hadn't felt in years. My parents' reaction was predictably skeptical. "You left a prestigious position to make. What exactly? Waxed fabric?" my father asked during a strained Sunday dinner 3 months into my venture. "Sustainable alternatives to disposable household products," I corrected, trying to keep the defensiveness from my voice. Starting with food storage solutions, but expanding into other categories as I refined the production process. "Crafts," my mother simplified dismissively. "You left a career to make crafts in your apartment." "Product design," I countered. The same professional skill set I was using at Meridian, just applied differently. Rebecca, already successful in pharmaceutical sales at 25, had been more directly cutting. "This sounds like something bored housewives do on Etsy while their husbands actually pay the bills. No offense." The addition of "no offense" did little to mitigate the intended sting, but I had smiled tightly and changed the subject. Their approval had never been forthcoming for my choices. I couldn't expect it to start with my riskiest decision yet. 6 months into my sabbatical, I faced the decision point I had established in my business plan. The metrics were clear. While showing promising growth, Hearth and Home wasn't yet generating sufficient income to support me fully. According to my original timeline, this meant returning to corporate employment while continuing the business as a side project. I sat in my apartment-turned-workshop, surrounded by inventory and packing materials, reviewing the data. Sales were increasing month over month. Customer feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with repeat purchase rates exceeding industry averages. I had established relationships with 3 local retailers who consistently sold out of my products. The rational choice was clear: return to stable employment while growing the business gradually. But as I imagined walking back into Meridian's corporate environment, returning to the frustrating dance of advocating for sustainability within systems designed to prioritize quarterly profits, something rebelled within me. That evening, I called Meridian's HR department and officially resigned. Then I applied for a business loan using my comprehensive market analysis, growth projections, and existing sales data as supporting evidence. The bank manager was skeptical but impressed by the thoroughness of my planning. "Most small businesses that come through here have passion but no concrete numbers," he noted, reviewing my documentation. "You've clearly approached this systematically. The approved loan was smaller than requested, but sufficient to lease a small workshop space and purchase equipment for scaled production. I moved operations out of my apartment and into a converted garage in an industrial area on the edge of town, unimpressive from the outside but perfectly functional for my needs. For the next 2 years, Hearth and Home existed in a state of perpetual precariousness. Some months brought encouraging growth, others barely covered expenses. I developed new products, refined production processes, built an e-commerce presence, and personally handled everything from manufacturing to customer service. 18-hour days became normal. Vacations became non-existent. Every penny of profit went back into the business. My family's assessment of my venture evolved from initial dismissal to concerned tolerance. Sunday dinners featured regular inquiries about when I might return to real employment, alongside comments about how tired I looked and references to friends' children with stable corporate careers. "Chen & Associates is looking for a senior designer," my father mentioned casually during one such dinner. "Martin's son-in-law is a partner there. I could put in a word." "Thank you, but I'm fully committed to Hearth and Home," I replied, the response now automatic after countless variations of this conversation. "You're not getting any younger, Olivia," my mother added, serene in her certainty about appropriate life trajectories. "Rebecca was promoted to regional manager last month, and she's already contributing to her retirement account." Rebecca smiled magnanimously. "Not everyone needs traditional success, Mom. Liv's little business keeps her happy, and that's what matters." The condescension was palpable but familiar enough to roll off me. I had stopped expecting them to understand what I was building or why it mattered to me. Their perception of success, titles, benefits, retirement accounts, was fundamentally different from what now drove me. Creating practical solutions that aligned with my values and genuinely helped consumers reduce their environmental impact. The turning point came in the 3rd year. A lifestyle blogger with a substantial following purchased my kitchen starter set and featured it in a post about reducing household waste. The resulting sales spike crashed my website temporarily, but led to connections with larger sustainable living communities online. Suddenly, Hearth and Home wasn't just my isolated endeavor, it was part of a growing movement. Orders increased exponentially. I hired my first employee, then my second. The converted garage workshop became cramped as inventory expanded and production scaled. I developed relationships with ethical suppliers, doubling down on my commitment that every component of each product would meet rigorous sustainability standards. The business that had been dismissed as crafts was now generating significant revenue and developing genuine market presence. My product design background, combined with 3 years of hands-on manufacturing experience, enabled me to create items that were simultaneously functional, beautiful, and environmentally responsible. The rare combination that consumers increasingly sought. When Mindful Living magazine contacted me about featuring Hearth and Home in their Sustainable Entrepreneurs issue, it represented validation beyond mere commercial success. The 8-page spread featured my workshop, detailed my design process, and highlighted the business philosophy that had guided every decision. Sustainability shouldn't be a luxury. It should be an accessible, practical choice for everyday households. The magazine hit newsstands on a Tuesday. By Wednesday evening, my inventory was sold out, and my inbox contained partnership inquiries from 3 national retailers interested in carrying Hearth and Home products. By Friday, I had scheduled meetings with 2 potential investors who specialized in scaling eco-conscious businesses. For the first time, the path forward wasn't about survival, but expansion. Thoughtful, values-aligned growth that could extend the impact of what I'd built. I spent the weekend updating my business plan, developing scaling strategies, and creating presentations for potential partners. The work was exhausting, but exhilarating, fueled by the recognition that Hearth and Home had reached a genuine tipping point. That Sunday, riding the momentum of the most promising week in my business's history, I arrived at my parents' house for dinner with something I hadn't brought in years: optimism that they might finally see value in what I had created. I brought the magazine feature, sales reports, and partnership inquiries, concrete evidence that my hobby had become a legitimate enterprise with significant potential. My mother answered the door with her usual mixture of affection and assessment. "You look tired, Olivia. Are you sleeping enough?" "I've been busy," I replied, stepping inside. "But it's good busy. I brought something to show you and Dad." "That's nice, dear," she said distractedly. "Rebecca and James are joining us tonight. She says she has exciting news." The familiar pivot to Rebecca momentarily dampened my enthusiasm, but I maintained my resolve to share my own news. In the living room, my father was already engaged in conversation with Rebecca, who was perched on the sofa looking particularly polished in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly workshop rent. "Olivia, you remember James?" Rebecca said as I entered, gesturing to the man beside her, tall, well-dressed, with thoughtful eyes and a reserved smile. "Of course," I nodded, extending my hand. "Nice to see you again." We had met briefly at previous family gatherings, though never with much opportunity for substantial conversation. Rebecca had been dating him for 6 months, a relationship she referenced frequently as evidence of her ascendant social trajectory. James Palmer came from a wealthy family with significant real estate holdings, a fact my parents had absorbed with obvious approval. "Likewise," James replied, his handshake firm and direct. "Rebecca mentioned you run your own business. Something in sustainable products?" Before I could respond, Rebecca laughed lightly. "It's a little Etsy shop, nothing corporate like you're used to dealing with. Liv makes eco-friendly kitchen items." The dismissive characterization of Hearth and Home, now approaching $500,000 in annual revenue with growing wholesale partnerships, was familiar but still stung. I opened my mouth to correct her when my mother called us to dinner. Throughout the meal, I waited for an appropriate opening to share my news, but the conversation remained centered on Rebecca's pharmaceutical career and her relationship with James. My father asked detailed questions about the Palmer family's real estate developments, while my mother made barely subtle references to wedding venues she had always admired. "Actually," Rebecca announced as my mother served dessert, "we do have some exciting news to share." I braced myself for an engagement announcement, preparing the appropriately enthusiastic response, despite the familiar sting of Rebecca's milestones always overshadowing my own. "James's family is launching a new division focused on sustainable living communities," Rebecca continued, her voice bright with practiced enthusiasm. "Fully integrated residential developments built around eco-conscious principles." "That sounds innovative," my father commented, immediately engaged. "There's growing market demand for sustainability in real estate." James nodded. "Exactly. Consumers increasingly want homes that help them live more environmentally responsible lives without sacrificing comfort or convenience. The challenge has been creating comprehensive solutions that address all aspects of daily living. Which is where my project comes in," Rebecca interjected smoothly. "I've been developing a business model for sustainable home goods that could be integrated into these residential communities, a complete product ecosystem that helps residents reduce their environmental impact effortlessly." I froze, fork suspended halfway to my mouth. Rebecca's words echoed with uncomfortable familiarity, not because they represented a common business concept, but because they were almost verbatim descriptions from my own business plan, the one I had shown her last month when she had expressed sudden interest in Hearth and Home's operations. "Your project?" I asked carefully, setting down my fork. Rebecca continued as if I hadn't spoken. "The model includes ethical sourcing frameworks, staged implementation for consumer adoption, and community integration strategies that align perfectly with the Palmer development philosophy." These weren't vague business concepts. They were the specific, distinctive elements of the expansion strategy I had developed over 5 years of building Hearth and Home. The exact approach I had outlined in the materials I had naively shared with Rebecca when she had claimed to be just curious. "About my growth plans," James turned to Rebecca with evident admiration. "The market analysis you presented to my parents was particularly impressive, demonstrating both the growing demand and the specific price points where sustainable alternatives become viable for mainstream consumers." The market analysis. My market analysis. The one I had spent months developing, tracking purchase patterns across demographic segments to identify precisely where sustainability and affordability intersected to create maximum market penetration. "Rebecca," I said more firmly, "that market analysis sounds exactly like the business documentation I showed you from Hearth and Home." A flicker of something, awareness perhaps or warning, crossed her face before she smiled dismissively. "Well, obviously I was inspired by some elements of your work, Olivia. That's what family is for, right? Supporting each other's ideas?" "Supporting, yes. Presenting them as your own, no." The words escaped before I could temper them with my usual family diplomacy. My mother's expression tightened with familiar disappointment. "Olivia, don't be petty. Rebecca is simply exploring professional opportunities." "By presenting my business model as her own creation?" I asked, the question directed more at Rebecca than my mother. "Your business model?" My father's tone carried equal parts confusion and skepticism. "You make homemade kitchen items. Rebecca is discussing a comprehensive sustainability strategy for real estate integration." "A strategy identical to the one I've developed for Hearth and Home over the past 5 years," I clarified, maintaining a calm I didn't entirely feel, "including specific language about ethical sourcing frameworks and community integration that comes directly from my business plan." James looked between Rebecca and me, confusion evident in his expression. "I'm sorry, but I'm not following. Rebecca, you said this was your original business concept." "It is my concept," Rebecca insisted, though a flush was creeping up her neck. "Olivia's little shop obviously inspired some of my thinking, but the comprehensive business approach is entirely my development." The dismissive characterization of my business, little shop, crafts, hobby, had never felt more deliberate than in this moment when Rebecca was simultaneously diminishing what I had built while attempting to claim its strategic framework. "Hearth and Home generated over $300,000 in revenue last year," I stated, the facts suddenly important in a way they hadn't been during previous family dismissals. "We're projecting over $500,000 this year, with national retail partnerships currently in negotiation." The business model Rebecca is describing, from ethical sourcing to community integration, is exactly what I've built, documented, and shared with her. The table fell silent. My father studied his dessert with sudden intensity. My mother's smile froze in place. Rebecca's expression hardened into the defensive glare I recognized from childhood confrontations, when she had been caught in deceptions but refused to acknowledge them. James looked increasingly uncomfortable, his gaze moving between Rebecca and me with growing comprehension. "The business plan mentioned hands-on product development experience," he said slowly. "Rebecca, you told my parents you'd been developing these sustainable products yourself." "I've been developing the concept," Rebecca replied, her voice taking on the slight tremor she had always been able to produce on demand when cornered. The actual products are just execution details. Execution details? The words escaped me before I could contain them. Rebecca, you've never designed or manufactured a single sustainable product. The business strategy you're describing is exactly what I've built with Hearth and Home, from concept through execution. My mother intervened with practiced smoothness. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding between sisters. Rebecca was probably just trying to help promote your work to James's family. By claiming it as her own? I asked quietly. Now, Olivia, my father began, his tone warning me against further disruption. There's no need for accusations. I'm sure Rebecca was just enthusiastic about connecting your activities with potential opportunities. The familiar dynamic was unfolding with painful predictability. Rebecca created the problem. I identified it. Somehow, I became positioned as the troublemaker for not accepting the situation. But something fundamental had shifted. Perhaps the thousands of hours I had invested in building my business, or perhaps the recent external validation from partners who genuinely valued what I had created. Whatever the cause, I found myself unwilling to participate in the established family script. I've worked too hard building this business to watch it be presented as someone else's concept, I said, rising from the table. James, I apologize for this awkward situation. But I want to be clear. The sustainable living business model Rebecca has described is my creation, not hers. Every element of it represents years of my professional work. Rebecca stood as well, tears now strategically appearing. I can't believe you're doing this right now, Olivia. This is exactly why I never mention we're related in professional settings. You always have to make everything about you. Rebecca, James said quietly, his tone bringing an immediate halt to her gathering momentum. Is what Olivia is saying true? The silence that followed provided its own answer. Rebecca's expression cycled through indignation, calculation, and finally manufactured vulnerability. I may have emphasized my involvement more than was strictly accurate, she admitted finally. But I was only trying to find connections that could benefit both of us. By claiming my work as your own? I pressed. By finding investors who could take your little business to the next level, Rebecca snapped, facade momentarily cracking. You think you can scale nationally with your converted garage operation? You need connections like James's family. Connections I could have made myself if introduced honestly, I pointed out. Instead, you've presented yourself as the business creator, which means any partnership would be with you, not me. James stood abruptly. I think I should go. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, thank you for dinner. He turned to me. Olivia, I apologize for the misunderstanding. I'd still be interested in discussing your actual business if you're willing. James, Rebecca protested, reaching for his arm. You can't be serious. It's just a silly misunderstanding about a hobby business. The look he gave her contained equal parts disappointment and reassessment. A misunderstanding implies confusion. Rebecca, this seems quite deliberate. He turned back to me. May I have your business card? I'd like to schedule a proper meeting. With slightly shaking hands, I retrieved a card from my purse and handed it to him. The embossed logo of Hearth and Home caught the light as he carefully placed it in his jacket pocket. I'll call you this week, he said with a nod before turning to leave. Rebecca rushed after him, their heated whispers audible from the hallway, as my mother began gathering dishes with pointed clatter. I hope you're satisfied, she said tightly. You've embarrassed your sister in front of her boyfriend's family now. Rebecca embarrassed herself by lying, I replied, helping clear. Despite my mother's obvious anger, and this isn't about satisfaction, it's about 5 years of my work being claimed by someone else. My father sighed heavily. Olivia, you know how important this relationship is to Rebecca. The Palmer family could open doors for her career, for all of us. Surely you could have addressed this privately instead of creating a scene. The familiar sense of invisibility descended. My work, my boundaries, my professional integrity, all secondary to Rebecca's social climbing and my parents' vicarious aspirations. But the feeling was accompanied by unexpected clarity. I didn't have to participate in this dynamic anymore. I didn't have to minimize myself to accommodate Rebecca's machinations. "I need to go," I said quietly, gathering my purse. "Thank you for dinner." "Olivia, don't be dramatic," my mother sighed. "Sit down. We need to discuss how we're going to fix this situation before the Palmers come for dinner on Friday." I paused at the doorway, a lifetime of conditioning urging me to comply, to participate in whatever damage control my parents deemed necessary to preserve Rebecca's opportunity. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and spoke with calm. I didn't entirely feel. There's nothing to fix from my perspective. Rebecca presented my business as her own. James now knows the truth. What happens next is between them. I turned to leave, then added, "And I won't be attending dinner on Friday. I have inventory to restock and wholesale contracts to review." My mother's expression registered shock at this unprecedented defiance. My father's face reddened with the beginning of a lecture. But for once, I didn't stay to receive it. I walked out the front door, passing Rebecca, who sat alone on the porch steps, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "He left," she said accusingly as I passed. "Are you happy now?" I stopped, looking down at the sister who had always found it easier to claim things than to create them. "No," I answered honestly. "I'm not happy that you tried to steal my business. I'm not happy that our parents are still enabling behavior that would be considered fraud in any professional context. And I'm not happy that I had to publicly defend work that represents the last 5 years of my life." "It wasn't like that," she insisted, though without her usual conviction. "I was just trying to make connections that could help us both." "Connections where you were positioned as the founder and visionary behind my company?" I pointed out. "That doesn't help me, Rebecca. That erases me." She looked away, unable or unwilling to acknowledge the simple truth. In the gathering twilight, I could see the little sister who had always believed that wanting something was justification enough for taking it. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked, genuine fear entering her voice. "James wants to meet with you about investing in your company. Are you going to turn his family against me?" The question revealed so much about how Rebecca viewed the world, as a zero-sum game where my success would necessarily mean her failure. It had never occurred to her that we might both succeed in different ways, that there might be enough recognition and opportunity for both of us. "I'm going to run my business," I answered simply. "I'm going to meet with potential investors who value what I've built, and I'm going to stop diminishing myself to make you feel bigger." I continued to my car, ignoring her calls behind me. As I drove away from my parents' house, a strange lightness began to replace the familiar weight of family obligation and expected self-sacrifice. For the first time, I had defended my creation without apology for taking up space. I had refused to participate in the family script that always cast me as supporting character in Rebecca's starring role. My phone began buzzing with texts almost immediately, Rebecca alternating between accusations and tearful pleas, my mother expressing disappointment in my behavior, my father demanding I apologize before Friday's dinner. I silenced the notifications and drove toward home, toward the workshop where I had built something authentic while no one in my family was paying attention. That night, as I prepared orders for shipping and updated inventory records, a new message appeared. An unknown number that turned out to be James Palmer. "Olivia, this is James. I'd like to formally apologize for the misunderstanding tonight. I'm impressed by what I've learned about your business and would appreciate the opportunity to discuss it properly, without intermediaries. My family's investment group is genuinely interested in sustainable business models like yours. Please let me know if you'd be willing to meet this week." I stared at the message, considering the implications. This was the connection Rebecca had been attempting to secure for herself, legitimate investor interest that could potentially take Hearth and Home to the national scale I'd been working toward. With steady hands, I typed my response. Thank you. James, I appreciate your directness. I'd be happy to meet and discuss potential collaboration. My workshop is open all day Wednesday if you'd like to see the operation firsthand before we talk specifics. His response came quickly. Wednesday works perfectly. Looking forward to seeing the real Hearth and Home. Setting down my phone, I ran my fingers over the smooth bamboo cutting board I was preparing to ship, crafted from sustainable materials by my own hands. 5 years earlier, I had left corporate security to build something I believed in, despite my family's dismissal. Tonight, I had finally defended that creation with the same conviction I had used to build it. Wednesday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The workshop felt different somehow, not the cramped converted garage with inadequate ventilation that I'd complained about for months, but the physical manifestation of everything I had built through persistence and vision. As I prepared for James Palmer's visit, I saw my business through fresh eyes. The methodically organized production area, the carefully sourced raw materials, the finished products ready for shipping, all evidence of a viable enterprise with genuine market value. I had spent Tuesday reorganizing the space, not to create an artificial impression, but to ensure the workshop accurately represented what Hearth and Home had become. The once chaotic storage system now displayed our product evolution chronologically, from the earliest beeswax wraps to our newest bamboo kitchen tools. Production stations were arranged to demonstrate the workflow that had emerged from 5 years of refinement. Financial records and growth projections were updated and printed for reference during our discussion. At precisely 10 a.m., a sleek black SUV pulled up outside. James Palmer emerged looking more casual than he had at Sunday's dinner, trading. The formal attire for a simple button-down and chinos that suggested serious business rather than social obligation. I greeted him at the entrance, extending my hand with professional confidence that contrasted sharply with the awkward family dinner introduction. Welcome to Hearth and Home, I said, opening the workshop door. Thank you for taking the time to visit. Thank you for agreeing to meet, he replied, his handshake firm. I appreciate your willingness to look past Sunday's uncomfortable situation. The diplomatic phrasing made me smile slightly. That's one way to describe it. As he stepped into the workshop, I watched his expression carefully. First impressions matter in potential business relationships, and I wanted to gauge his genuine reaction to my operation. His eyes moved methodically around the space, taking in details with the focused assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating business potential rather than making social niceties. You do all production on site? He asked, examining a stack of newly finished cutting boards. Currently, yes. We're at capacity for this space, which is one of the growth challenges I'm addressing in our expansion plan. I gestured toward the production area. I'd be happy to walk you through our process if you're interested. What followed was the most comprehensive and engaged conversation about my business that I had ever experienced. James asked detailed, thoughtful questions about everything from sourcing strategies to production scalability to customer acquisition costs. He examined products with genuine curiosity, tested materials with knowledgeable attention, and reviewed financial documentation with sharp analytical focus. These margins are impressive for hand-produced items, he noted, reviewing the profit and loss statements I had provided. How have you maintained them while using premium sustainable materials? Production efficiency and strategic sourcing, I explained, pulling up additional documentation. I've developed relationships with suppliers that allow bulk purchasing at advantageous rates, and I've continuously refined our production processes to reduce waste and labor time. For 3 hours, we discussed every aspect of Hearth and Home, its history, current operations, and future potential. Unlike previous business conversations where I had felt the need to justify sustainability as a priority, James seemed to inherently understand its market value beyond mere ethical considerations. The business fundamentals are solid, he said, finally setting aside the growth projections he had been reviewing. You've built something with genuine scale potential, Olivia. The combination of sustainability commitment and commercial viability is precisely what my family's investment group has been seeking. The validation from someone with his business acumen was unexpectedly affecting. After years of dismissal from my family and skepticism from traditional business advisors, here was someone who clearly recognized the value in what I had created. Thank you, I said simply, the words inadequate for the affirmation they acknowledged. I should be thanking you, James replied. The Palmer Group has been looking to diversify our investments beyond real estate, particularly in sustainable consumer goods. Your business model aligns perfectly with our criteria. He paused, his expression becoming slightly more reserved. I feel I should address Sunday's situation directly. I had no idea that the business concept Rebecca presented was actually your creation. She had conveyed it as her own development, inspired by emerging market trends. I gathered that, I said carefully, not wanting to derail a promising business conversation with family complications. It puts me in an awkward position personally, he continued. But professionally, I'm glad it led me to the actual source of the business model that impressed my family. My parents are still interested in potential investment if you're open to discussing partnership. The moment of opportunity I had been working toward for 5 years had finally arrived, emerging from the most unexpected and uncomfortable circumstances. I took a deep breath, considering my response carefully. I am open to investment discussions, I confirmed. But I want to be clear about my priorities. Maintaining our sustainability standards is non-negotiable, even if it sometimes means choosing options that aren't maximally profitable in the short term, and I need to retain creative and operational control of product development. Instead of the resistance I had encountered from previous potential investors when outlining these conditions, James nodded thoughtfully. Those priorities align with our investment philosophy, he said. We're interested in long-term, sustainable growth rather than short-term profit maximization. And your product development expertise is precisely what makes this business valuable. Constraining that would be counterproductive. The conversation shifted to specific partnership structures, investment amounts, equity percentages, growth targets, and expansion timelines. James proposed bringing his parents, the primary decision-makers for their investment group, to tour the workshop the following week. We agreed on a framework for formal discussions and parted with a tentative partnership structure that preserved everything I valued about Hearth and Home, while providing the capital necessary for significant expansion. As James's SUV pulled away from the workshop, I remained in the doorway, processing what had just occurred. The confrontation at Sunday's dinner, painful and uncomfortable as it had been, had directly led to this potential partnership that could transform Hearth and Home's trajectory. Rebecca's attempted appropriation of my business had inadvertently connected me with exactly the type of investors I had been seeking. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had diminished myself. In family settings to maintain peace, allowing their dismissal of my work to go unchallenged. The one time I had finally defended my creation, refused to be erased from my own narrative, had created the opportunity I had been working toward all along. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from my mother. I had ignored the barrage of messages since Sunday, but eventually I would need to address the family situation. Taking a deep breath, I answered. Olivia, finally, my mother began without preamble. We need to discuss your behavior on Sunday. Rebecca is absolutely devastated, and the dinner with the Palmers is tomorrow night. Your father and I expect you to attend and apologize for creating such an unnecessary scene. The familiar script, Rebecca's feelings prioritized, my boundaries dismissed, family appearance valued over fundamental honesty. But something had shifted in me, a recalibration of what I was willing to accept in service of family harmony. I won't be attending Friday's dinner, I replied calmly. And I won't be apologizing for identifying that Rebecca presented my business as her own creation. This stubbornness is childish, Olivia, my mother sighed. Rebecca was only trying to make valuable connections. You should be grateful she was thinking of ways to help your little project. My little project generated over $300,000 in revenue last year, I stated firmly. And James Palmer just spent 3 hours here discussing potential investment partnership. Any connection that begins with someone claiming my work as their own isn't valuable. It's exploitative. Silence on the line, then. James came to see you? What about Rebecca? The question crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic. Concern not for the ethical breach, but for how it affected Rebecca's relationship prospects. I had spent years accepting this imbalance, but recent events had clarified what I could no longer tolerate. What about Rebecca? I echoed. She attempted to present my business, 5 years of my work, as her own creation. The fact that you're more concerned about her relationship than this fundamental dishonesty is exactly why I won't be attending Friday's dinner. You've always been so dramatic about your independence, my mother said dismissively. Family supports each other, Olivia. Sometimes that means overlooking small misunderstandings for the greater good. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate misrepresentation. I paused, then added with newfound clarity. And family support should be reciprocal, not one person consistently sacrificing for another's advancement. The conversation ended with my mother's familiar disappointment and my unprecedented refusal to acquiesce to family pressure. I returned to workshop operations with a strange mixture of emotions, regret for the family conflict, but absolute certainty that I had finally established necessary boundaries. The following day brought news that the Friday dinner with the Palmer family had been canceled. Rebecca left a series of increasingly distraught voicemails, alternating between blame and desperate appeals for reconciliation. My father sent a terse text expressing his disappointment in my selfish behavior. My mother called twice more. Each conversation following the same pattern of attempted guilt induction, met with my gentle but firm refusal to accept responsibility for a situation I hadn't created. By the weekend, family communication had dwindled to occasional text messages, conveying information rather than emotional appeals. The respite allowed me to focus entirely on preparing for the upcoming meeting with the Palmer Investment Group. I refined my presentation, updated financial projections, and developed a comprehensive 5-year growth strategy that maintained our core values while outlining pragmatic expansion milestones. Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the Sunday dinner confrontation, James arrived at the workshop accompanied by his parents, Eleanor and Richard Palmer, whose real estate development company had transformed multiple urban areas with innovative, mixed-use projects. Eleanor's sharp analytical questions and Richard's strategic vision confirmed they were exactly the type of investors I had hoped to attract. Business-minded but values-driven, focused on sustainable growth rather than extractive. Profit. Your model addresses the primary challenge in sustainable consumer goods, Eleanor observed after thoroughly examining our production process and business documentation. You found the intersection where environmental responsibility meets practical consumer adoption. That's surprisingly rare. Most sustainability-focused businesses either create luxury products for the eco-conscious elite or compromise their standards to achieve mass-market pricing, Richard added. Your middle path approach is exactly what we've been seeking for our sustainable living community concept. The meeting concluded with a formal investment offer that exceeded my expectations. Sufficient capital for significant expansion while preserving my majority ownership and operational control. The partnership would include distribution through the Palmer Group's planned sustainable community developments, providing guaranteed wholesale channels alongside our existing retail relationships. As we finalized the preliminary agreement, Eleanor addressed the uncomfortable context directly. James explained the unusual circumstances that led to our introduction. I want to assure you that our interest is based entirely on the business you've built, not on any personal connections." The acknowledgement was both professional and unexpectedly comforting. Confirmation that the partnership was founded on genuine business value rather than complicated family dynamics. That evening, as I reviewed the investment documentation, at my kitchen table surrounded by the creative prototypes for our next product line, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow?" After a moment's consideration, I replied, "Okay. Greenleaf Cafe, 1 p.m. The following day, I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entrance. Rebecca arrived precisely on time, looking uncharacteristically subdued in minimal makeup and casual clothing, rather than her usual polished presentation. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down, her typical confidence notably absent. "Of course," I replied neutrally, waiting to understand her purpose before committing to any particular conversational direction. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding direct eye contact. "So, the Palmers invested in your business." News traveled fast in our interconnected social circles. "Yes, we finalized the agreement yesterday." "Congratulations," she offered, the word seeming to cost her considerable effort. "James says it's a significant investment." I nodded, still waiting for the real purpose of this meeting to emerge. Rebecca took a deep breath, then spoke with uncharacteristic directness. "James broke up with me, said he couldn't be with someone who would claim another person's work as their own, that it revealed a fundamental character issue he couldn't overlook." The information wasn't entirely surprising, but still carried emotional complexity. "I'm sorry about your relationship," I said sincerely. "That wasn't my intention in defending my business." "I know," she acknowledged, surprising me. "I've done a lot of thinking this past week about why I thought it was acceptable to present your business model as my concept, about why I've always felt entitled to appropriate things you've created." The self-awareness was unprecedented in our relationship. Rebecca had always been defended against any suggestion of impropriety, protected by our parents' consistent reinforcement that her actions were justifiable regardless of impact. "Why did you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. She stared into her coffee for a long moment before answering. "Because it's always been so easy for you to create things, to make something from nothing, to build without needing validation or attention." Her voice caught slightly. "I can sell anything, but I've never created anything original. When I saw how impressed James was with your business model, I wanted that kind of admiration directed at me for once." The vulnerability was so unexpected that I struggled to formulate a response. This wasn't the Rebecca I knew, the confidently entitled sister who took what she wanted without consideration for others' boundaries. This was someone I had rarely glimpsed, the person beneath the perfected exterior. "Creating isn't easy," I finally said. "It's grueling, uncertain work with far more failures than successes. The version of Hearth and Home you saw was built on 5 years of 18-hour days and countless rejected prototypes." "But you did build it," she pointed out. "While I was collecting commission checks selling other people's pharmaceuticals, you were actually making something meaningful, something entirely yours." The acknowledgement of what I had built, its meaning beyond mere commercial value, was something I had never expected from Rebecca. Our relative achievements had always been measured in our family by external metrics, salary, title, benefits, rather than personal fulfillment or authentic creation. "I didn't come here just to tell you about James," Rebecca continued after a pause. "I came to apologize. What I did was wrong. Presenting your business as my creation wasn't making connections or helping both of us. It was theft. Intellectual theft, but theft nonetheless." The apology was so direct, so devoid of the usual qualifications and deflections that characterized Rebecca's rare acknowledgments of wrongdoing, that I momentarily doubted its sincerity. But her expression contained none of the calculated vulnerability she had perfected for managing difficult situations. This appeared to be genuine remorse. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." "I don't expect it changes anything," she added quickly. "I understand if you don't trust me. I wouldn't trust me either. But I needed you to know that I recognize what I did, and I'm genuinely sorry for it." We sat in silence for a moment, the acknowledgement creating a different quality of space between us, less defended, more authentic than our interactions had been in years. "What will you do now?" I asked eventually. Rebecca shrugged slightly. "Work-wise, nothing changes. I'm still good at pharmaceutical sales. But personally, I think I need to figure out who I am beyond the role I've been playing. Beyond being the successful daughter, the social connector, the perfect girlfriend. I'm not sure who that person is yet." The admission of uncertainty from my perpetually confident sister was perhaps more surprising than the apology itself. Rebecca had always projected absolute assurance about her path and choices, using that certainty as contrast to my more exploratory approach to life. "It's not easy," I said, thinking of my own journey from corporate security to entrepreneurial uncertainty. "Finding your authentic direction. But it's worth the discomfort." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about what you said that night, about how I find it easier to claim things than to create them. You were right. I've never built anything of my own. I've just positioned myself advantageously in relation to what others have built." The self-awareness suggested a capacity for growth I hadn't previously recognized in my sister. Perhaps the confrontation at Sunday dinner had catalyzed something valuable for both of us, my long-overdue boundary setting and her belated recognition of patterns that limited her authentic development. "Creation is available to everyone," I offered. "It just requires willingness to start from nothing and risk genuine failure, to value the process beyond external validation." "That's the scary part," Rebecca admitted. "I've defined myself by external validation for so long, I'm not sure what's left when that's removed." I recognized that fear intimately, had faced it myself when leaving Meridian's structured advancement path for the uncertain terrain of entrepreneurship. What's left is the possibility of building something authentic, something that reflects your actual values rather than others' expectations. Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, moving beyond the immediate conflict into territory we hadn't explored since childhood. Genuine exchange about our different approaches to life, acknowledgement of the family dynamics that had shaped our relationship, tentative exploration of what a more balanced sisterhood might look like. We parted with no dramatic reconciliation, but with a foundation for potential rebuilding. Not the artificial harmony our parents had always enforced, but something potentially more valuable because it acknowledged the real breach that had occurred. As I drove back to the workshop afterward, I reflected on the unexpected outcomes of that Sunday dinner confrontation. In defending my business against appropriation, I had gained not just investment partnership, but the beginning of authentic relationship with my sister, one based on mutual respect rather than established family roles. The boundary I had finally established had paradoxically created the possibility of genuine connection. The workshop hummed with activity when I arrived. The investment capital had already enabled initial expansion steps, additional equipment, 2 new production assistants, expanded inventory capacity. My original vision for Hearth and Home was transforming from aspiration to implementation with remarkable speed. James called that evening to discuss the first phase of our partnership, implementation. Our conversation remained strictly professional, focused entirely on business development rather than family complications. His ability to separate personal dynamics from business collaboration confirmed he was exactly the type of partner I had hoped to find, someone who valued what I had built on its genuine merits. The sustainable community integration could begin as early as next quarter, he explained, discussing the timeline for featuring hearth and home products in the Palmer Group's new eco-focused residential development. We're breaking ground on the model homes in 6 weeks, which gives us perfect timing to incorporate your kitchen and storage solutions from the beginning. The opportunity we discussed represented exactly the kind of thoughtful scaling I had envisioned for Hearth and Home. Growth that maintained our values while expanding our impact. The investment wasn't just financial capital, it was strategic. Partnership with developers who shared my commitment to practical sustainability. That night, reviewing production plans in my apartment, I received a text from my mother. Your father and I would like to see your workshop, if you're willing to show us. The request was unprecedented. In 5 years of building Hearth and Home, neither of my parents had expressed interest in visiting the physical space where I created my hobby crafts. Their sudden curiosity suggested Rebecca's confession had perhaps affected family dynamics beyond our direct relationship. I replied simply, "Tomorrow afternoon works. 2 p.m.?" Their arrival the following day was punctual, but noticeably tentative. None of the entitled certainty with which they typically occupied space. They stood awkwardly at the workshop entrance, taking in the bustling production area with expressions that suggested they were seeing something entirely different from what they had imagined. "This is substantial," my father commented, watching the coordinated activity of the production team. I pictured something much smaller. "Most people do," I replied, neither accusatory nor defensive, simply stating reality. "Would you like a tour?" The next hour revealed a side of my parents I had rarely witnessed: genuine curiosity about my work, attentive questions about processes, and most surprisingly, no comparisons to Rebecca's career or achievements. They examined products with newfound interest, asked thoughtful questions about materials sourcing, and listened with apparent engagement as I explained our expansion plans. The Palmer investment will allow us to scale production while maintaining our sustainability standards, I explained, showing them the newly installed equipment. Their development projects also provide built-in distribution channels through their eco-focused residential communities. My father nodded, studying the production flow with professional assessment rather than dismissive tolerance. The vertical integration makes sense. Guaranteed wholesale channels while you expand retail presence. The comment, expressing understanding of business strategy rather than treating my work as inconsequential, was so unexpected that I momentarily lost my train of thought. My mother noticed my surprise and had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "We haven't taken your business seriously," she acknowledged quietly. "That was our mistake." The admission wasn't quite an apology but represented significant movement from their previous position. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably but added his own acknowledgement. "What you've built here is impressive, Olivia. Genuinely impressive. We should have recognized that sooner." The validation I had sought from them for years, arriving now, after external investment had already confirmed what I had known about my business, carried a bittersweet quality. I appreciated their recognition, but no longer required it to validate my path. The Sunday dinner confrontation had freed me from that particular dependency. "Thank you," I said simply. "Would you like to see our newest product prototypes?" As I showed them the upcoming product line, bamboo storage solutions designed specifically for the Palmer Group's sustainable living communities, I realized something fundamental had shifted, not just in their perception of my work, but in my need for their approval. I had finally stopped measuring my success against their limited understanding of it. Their validation was welcome, but no longer necessary for my sense of accomplishment. The workshop visit concluded with tentative plans for them to attend our upcoming product launch event. Genuine interest rather than obligatory family support. As they prepared to leave, my mother hesitated, then asked the question that had likely prompted their visit. "Rebecca told us what happened, that she presented Your business as her own creation to the Palmer family. She paused, visibly struggling with acknowledging the situation directly. We didn't handle it well, when you tried to address it at dinner. My father nodded in reluctant agreement. We've always... He trailed off, then tried again. The dynamic between you girls has been... We may have enabled certain patterns. The careful phrasing, avoiding direct admission while acknowledging general responsibility, was characteristic of my parents' conflict resolution approach. But the attempt itself represented significant progress from their initial dismissal of the situation. I appreciate that recognition, I replied, choosing not to press for the more explicit acknowledgement they weren't yet ready to offer. It means a lot that you came to see the workshop today. We parted with more genuine warmth than had characterized our interactions in years. No dramatic reconciliation, but a tentative step toward more authentic relationship, one that recognized me as a capable adult with legitimate accomplishments rather than the perpetually secondary daughter. As their car pulled away from the workshop, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, residual sadness for the years of dismissal, but genuine hope for evolving family dynamics. The confrontation at Sunday dinner had been painful but necessary, creating space for authenticity where artificial harmony had previously prevailed. That evening, working late at the workshop to finalize our first major wholesale order, I received an unexpected visitor. James arrived just as I was preparing to leave, his expression suggesting purpose rather than casual conversation. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said as I welcomed him inside. There's something I wanted to discuss in person rather than over the phone. Of course, I replied, curious about his unexpected appearance. Is everything all right with the partnership? Implementation? The business aspects are proceeding perfectly, he assured me. This is somewhat more personal. I waited, giving him space to articulate whatever had prompted this unscheduled visit. I wanted to be transparent about something, he continued, after a moment. Rebecca and I have ended our relationship, as you may know. That decision was made independently of our business partnership and should have no bearing on our professional collaboration. I understand and appreciate the distinction, I assured him. Personal relationships and business partnerships can and should remain separate. He nodded, seeming relieved at my response, but still carrying tension that suggested more to communicate. There's something else, something I've been considering since our first meeting here last week. The slight nervousness was uncharacteristic for someone who typically projected such assured professionalism. I waited, curious about whatever prompted this unusual demeanor. I've been impressed not just by the business you've built, but by how you've built it, with integrity, vision, and remarkable persistence. Those qualities are rare in any context, but especially in entrepreneurship. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. I find myself interested in getting to know you better, outside of our business context. The statement took a moment to register fully, its implications shifting my understanding of our interactions over the past week. Are you asking me out? I clarified, wanting to avoid misunderstanding. Yes, he confirmed, a hint of smile breaking through his professional reserve. But I completely understand if that would complicate our business relationship, or if the family situation makes it inappropriate. It's entirely your decision. The request was unexpected but not unwelcome. Throughout our business interactions, I had appreciated James's intelligence, integrity, and genuine interest in sustainable enterprise. The potential complications were obvious: business partnership, family conflict, recent breakup with my sister. But the connection we had developed through honest professional collaboration felt worth exploring. I'd like that, I replied after, considering the implications. Though we should proceed with awareness of the various complications. His smile broadened with evident relief. Absolutely. Transparent communication and clear boundaries seem essential given the circumstances. We arranged to meet for dinner later that week, a first step toward exploring connection beyond business collaboration. As he left the workshop, I found myself reflecting on the remarkable chain of events that had unfolded from that Sunday dinner confrontation. In defending my business against appropriation, I had gained not just investment partnership, but potential, personal connection with someone who genuinely valued what I had created. The boundaries I had finally established had paradoxically opened new possibilities rather than limiting them. Professional expansion, authentic family dynamics, and now, perhaps personal relationship grounded in mutual respect. The confrontation that had seemed catastrophic in the moment had actually been the necessary breaking point, the clean fracture that allowed proper healing and alignment. By refusing to participate any longer in the family dynamic that had always positioned me as secondary, I had finally claimed primary authorship of my own narrative. As I locked the workshop that evening, surveying the expanded operation that represented 5 years of dedication, finally receiving appropriate recognition, I understood something essential about boundaries and authenticity. Defending what you've created isn't selfish. It's necessary for anything meaningful to flourish. The Sunday dinner that had seemed like relationship destruction had actually been the foundation for more authentic connections with my sister, my parents, potential partners, and most importantly, with myself. The dinner with James was scheduled for Friday evening at Terrine, a farm-to-table restaurant known for its commitment to local sourcing and sustainable practices. The choice seemed appropriate for our first non-business interaction, acknowledging our shared values while creating space to explore connection beyond professional collaboration. I arrived a few minutes early, using the time to settle my unexpected nervousness. Despite our multiple business meetings over the past 2 weeks, this context felt entirely different. The professional confidence that had become second nature in workshop discussions was suddenly less accessible when the conversation wouldn't be anchored by business plans and growth projections. James arrived precisely on time, dressed in a way that similarly straddled personal and professional worlds, polished enough to suggest respect for the occasion, but relaxed enough to differentiate this from our business meetings. His smile as he approached contained genuine warmth rather than professional courtesy. "You found it all right?" he asked as he sat down across from me. "I've been here before," I replied. "Their sustainability practices align with Hearth and Home's philosophy. They source entirely from farms within a 100-mile radius." The comment emerged more like a business observation than personal conversation. James noticed, his smile widening slightly. "We can discuss supply chain ethics if you'd like, but I was hoping to learn more about Olivia beyond Hearth and Home tonight." The gentle redirection highlighted how thoroughly I had integrated my business identity with my personal self over the past 5 years. When your creation becomes your primary focus, the boundary between professional and personal naturally blurs. This evening would require conscious effort to share aspects of myself beyond the entrepreneur he had come to know. "Fair point," I acknowledged with a slightly embarrassed smile. "Though I'm not sure how interesting Olivia beyond Hearth and Home actually is these days. The business has been all-consuming." "I doubt that," James replied. "No one builds something like Hearth and Home without being driven by deeper values and interests. The business is an expression of the person, not the entirety of them." The observation was unexpectedly insightful, recognizing the relationship between creator and creation in a way few people in my life had articulated. It opened a conversation that flowed with surprising ease as we explored the experiences and values that had shaped our respective paths. I shared stories from before Hearth and Home, my childhood fascination with fixing broken objects, my corporate design experience and growing disillusionment with superficial sustainability, the moment of decision to risk security for authentic creation. James listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that suggested desire to understand, rather than merely exchange expected social information. In turn, he shared his own journey, growing up in a successful business family but struggling to find his authentic place within it, pursuing environmental studies against his father's initial resistance, gradually integrating sustainable principles into the family's real estate developments through persistent advocacy rather than confrontation. It would have been easier to reject the family business entirely, he explained, to position myself in opposition to what my father had built. But I realized I could have more impact by working from within, transforming existing systems rather than abandoning them. His approach resonated with my own experience, navigating the tension between idealism and pragmatism in building hearth and home, wanting to create perfectly sustainable products while recognizing the need for commercial viability and consumer accessibility. The perfect can become the enemy of the good, I observed. I've had to accept that incremental improvement, reaching millions of households, ultimately creates more positive impact than perfect sustainability reaching only a few. The conversation continued with remarkable fluidity, moving beyond professional philosophies into personal territories, books that had influenced our thinking, places that had shaped our perspectives, relationships that had taught important lessons. Dinner extended into dessert and then coffee as we discovered layers of connection beyond our business alignment. As the evening concluded, James walked me to my car, the comfortable silence suggesting mutual recognition of something worth pursuing further. "I've enjoyed this," he said simply as we reached my vehicle. "Would you be interested in continuing the conversation? Perhaps somewhere less formal next time?" "I would," I replied with equal directness, "though I think we should acknowledge the potential complications." He nodded, understanding my reference to both our business partnership and the recent relationship with Rebecca. "Transparency seems essential," he agreed. "From my perspective, our business collaboration is valuable independently of any personal connection we might explore. And regarding Rebecca," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "that relationship ended because of fundamental value misalignment that became impossible to overlook. It would have reached that conclusion regardless of other factors." The explanation seemed authentic rather than diplomatic, genuine recognition that his relationship with Rebecca had failed on its own terms rather than because of my involvement. Still, family dynamics added undeniable complexity to whatever might develop between us. "My family situation is evolving," I acknowledged. The Sunday dinner confrontation created ripple effects I'm still navigating. Adding another layer of connection to the Palmer family would certainly complicate that process. "Would you prefer to postpone exploring this until things settle?" he asked, prioritizing consideration over immediate pursuit. I considered the question thoughtfully. The family situation remained unresolved, with tentative steps toward more authentic relationships still in very early stages. Adding romantic complexity carried obvious risks, yet waiting for perfect circumstances often meant missing genuine opportunities. "I think we proceed with awareness rather than postponement," I decided, carefully, transparently, but honestly. His smile suggested agreement with both the conclusion and the methodical approach. That aligns with my thinking. "Shall we say hiking at Redwood Ridge next Saturday? I've been told the spring wildflowers are exceptional this year." We confirmed plans and parted with a warm handshake that lingered just slightly longer than professional courtesy would dictate. Driving home, I experienced a strange combination of emotions: excitement about the connection we were exploring alongside awareness of the complications it might introduce into already complex family dynamics. The following Wednesday brought the first major delivery of Hearth and Home products to the Palmer Group's model Sustainable Community Development. I supervised the installation personally, ensuring our kitchen and storage solutions were integrated precisely as designed within the demonstration homes. The expanded workshop operations had successfully met our first major wholesale deadline, validation of the systems I had developed over 5 years of gradual refinement. As I reviewed the final installations, Richard Palmer arrived to inspect the model home's progress. His approving assessment of how our products complemented the sustainable design elements confirmed the partnership's mutual benefit. We discussed next phase implementation with the easy collaboration that had characterized our business relationship from the beginning. Your products elevate the entire concept, he noted as we toured the completed kitchen in the primary model home. They transform sustainability from abstract benefit to tangible experience. Prospective residents can immediately visualize how these systems will integrate into their daily lives. The validation from someone with his extensive development experience reinforced my confidence in Hearth & Home's growth direction. Our products weren't merely commercially viable, they were essential components of larger sustainability solutions. As Richard departed, he mentioned casually, "Eleanor, and I have enjoyed getting to know you through this partnership. James speaks highly of your dinner conversation last week. We hope to see more of you beyond our business collaboration." The comment was offered with professional discretion, but contained unmistakable personal warmth. The Palmer family appeared to be collectively signaling acceptance of potential relationship between James and me, despite the recent history with Rebecca. The implicit support was both reassuring and slightly discomfiting, family approval creating its own form of complication. That evening, as I updated production schedules at the workshop to accommodate increasing wholesale orders, my phone rang with Rebecca's number. We had maintained limited contact since our coffee meeting 3 weeks earlier, exchanging occasional text messages, but having no substantive conversations. Curious about her purpose, I answered. "Olivia, hi," she began, her tone uncharacteristically tentative. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Just wrapping up at the workshop," I replied neutrally. "What's up?" "I heard about the model home installation," she said. "The Palmer development. Congratulations. That's a significant milestone for Hearth & Home." The sincere acknowledgement of my business achievement, without qualification or comparison, represented notable evolution in our interaction patterns. Previously, Rebecca had either dismissed my work entirely or diminished its significance through strategic undermining. "Thank you," I responded, genuine appreciation in my voice. "It's been intense meeting the production timeline, but seeing the products installed in context made everything worthwhile." "I also heard," she continued, hesitation evident, "about dinner with James last week." "Ah, there it was, the actual purpose of her call." I waited, curious how she would approach this potentially volatile topic. "I'm not calling to create drama," she clarified quickly, sensing my wariness. "Actually, the opposite. I wanted you to know I'm genuinely fine with it. You and James exploring. Whatever you're exploring." The statement was so contrary to expected patterns that I momentarily questioned its sincerity. Rebecca had never willingly accepted perceived competition, particularly regarding relationships that might eclipse her social standing. "That's unexpected," I acknowledged honestly. She laughed slightly, a real laugh rather than the practiced, social sound she typically deployed. "I know. Believe me, I've surprised myself with this response, but the past few weeks have been clarifying about a lot of things." "In what way?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "Well, for one thing, I've been seeing a therapist," she said, the admission itself representing unprecedented vulnerability. "Started right after our coffee meeting, and she's helping me understand some patterns, particularly how I've related to you over the years." The revelation that Rebecca had sought professional guidance to address our dysfunctional dynamic was perhaps the most unexpected development yet in the post-confrontation evolution of our relationship. Rebecca had always presented herself as completely self-sufficient, requiring no external support or perspective. "That's really positive, Rebecca," I said sincerely. "It's been difficult," she admitted. realizing how much of my identity has been built around external validation and comparison, particularly comparison to you, but it's also been freeing. Starting to recognize those patterns means I can potentially change them. The self-awareness suggested genuine commitment to personal growth rather than strategic positioning. Rebecca's characteristic manipulation had always been performed with such commitment that the performer herself seemed convinced of the performance. This conversation contained none of those familiar theatrical elements, just straightforward acknowledgement of difficult truths. When I heard about you and James, she continued, my first reaction was predictable: jealousy, resentment, sense of being replaced. But then I recognized that pattern for what it was. James and I were fundamentally incompatible. What ended our relationship wasn't you. It was my dishonesty, and his response to it. The mature assessment of her own responsibility represented significant evolution from our coffee meeting, where she had still partially framed the breakup as consequence of my actions rather than her own choices. I appreciate your telling me this, I said, still processing the unexpected direction of our conversation. You deserve happiness, Olivia, she said simply. You've worked incredibly hard building something authentic and valuable. If James recognizes that value in your business and in you personally, that's something I need to respect rather than resent. The generous framing, acknowledging both my professional accomplishment and personal worth, contrasted sharply with years of subtle, undermining and competitive positioning. If genuine, it suggested possibility for relationship transformation I had never seriously considered. Thank you, Rebecca, I replied, emotion making my voice slightly unsteady. That means a lot. I'm trying, she said, vulnerability evident. I can't promise perfect consistency. These patterns are deeply ingrained. But I'm genuinely working on becoming someone who celebrates your success rather than feeling threatened by it. The acknowledgement of ongoing struggle rather than instant transformation added credibility to her stated intentions. Real change happens gradually, with inconsistent progress rather than dramatic conversion. That's all any of us can do, I offered. Recognize patterns and work toward healthier ones. We ended the conversation with tentative plans to meet for coffee again the following week. Small steps toward reconstructing our relationship on more authentic foundation. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the remarkable ripple effects emerging from that catalytic Sunday dinner confrontation. What had initially seemed like relationship destruction had actually initiated relationship transformation, creating possibility for connections based on authenticity rather than established family scripts. By finally defending what I had created, I had inadvertently created space for something new to emerge in multiple relationship domains. The hiking date with James that Saturday unfolded with the same natural connection that had characterized our dinner. Away from business contexts, our conversation expanded into new territories: childhood memories, travel experiences, philosophical perspectives, personal challenges. The physical activity provided natural rhythm to our interaction, comfortable silences punctuating engaged discussion as we navigated steeper trail sections. At the summit viewpoint, overlooking the valley where both the Palmer Sustainable Development and my workshop were located, James gestured toward the visible evidence of our respective professional contributions to the landscape. There's something powerful about seeing the physical manifestation of values, he observed. Ideas transformed into tangible reality that changes how people live. The observation captured precisely what had motivated my transition from corporate design to entrepreneurship: desire to create actual objects that helped people live more sustainably rather than merely discussing theoretical approaches. James seemed to intuitively understand this drive without my needing to articulate it explicitly. As our relationship developed over subsequent weeks, I was struck by the ease of our connection, the natural alignment of values, the mutual respect for each other's work, the balanced exchange that characterized our communication. Unlike previous relationships where I had found myself either diminishing my professional focus to accommodate a partner's ego or struggling to justify my priorities, with James these tensions were noticeably absent. "I admire how completely you've committed to building Hearth and Home," he commented during a late dinner at my apartment after we had both worked well into the evening on our respective projects. "The integration of values and work is rare." "It hasn't always been simple," I acknowledged, thinking of the years of financial precariousness and family skepticism. There were definitely moments when returning to corporate security seemed like the rational choice. "What kept you going?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his expression. I considered the question thoughtfully. Initially, stubborn determination not to fail. Then gradually, evidence that what I was creating genuinely mattered. Not just commercially, but meaningfully. Customers who wrote about how our products had helped them reduce their environmental impact without sacrificing practicality. That tangible difference became more important than security. He nodded with understanding that came from his own experience integrating sustainability principles into his family's development approach. The alignment between values and work creates a particular kind of satisfaction that compensation alone never provides. This shared understanding of purpose beyond profit, of creation as expression of deeper values, formed the foundation of our developing connection. As spring transitioned into summer, our relationship deepened alongside the growing business partnership between Hearth and Home and the Palmer Group. The promised coffee with Rebecca evolved into regular monthly meetings, sometimes awkward but increasingly genuine in their mutual effort toward healthier connection. She shared her ongoing therapy insights with surprising openness, while I offered honest perspective on our shared history without the resentment that had previously colored my perception. "I'm dating someone new," she mentioned during our July meeting. The information offered without the comparative positioning that would have previously accompanied such an announcement. "He's a wildlife photographer, completely different from my usual type. Very grounded, connected to nature, genuinely passionate about his work rather than his career trajectory." "He sounds interesting," I replied, noting the shift in her relationship priorities from status to substance. "He is," she confirmed with a smile that contained none of her practiced social brilliance, but something more authentic. "And significantly, he has absolutely no connection to either of our professional worlds. Just his own entirely separate passion. It's refreshing." The choice of partner whose value existed independently from her social climbing aspirations suggested genuine evolution in Rebecca's approach to relationships. Her therapeutic work appeared to be creating space for authentic connection rather than strategic advancement, parallel to my own experience of finding relationship based on mutual respect rather than accommodating dynamics. Family dinner dynamics had similarly evolved, though with less dramatic transformation than my individual relationships with Rebecca and James. My parents maintained their newfound respect for Hearth and Home's legitimate business success while occasionally reverting to established patterns in other interaction domains. Change happened unevenly, with progress and regression coexisting as we collectively learned new ways of relating. "The Palmer partnership has certainly validated your business model," my father observed during a Sunday dinner in late July, his tone containing both genuine acknowledgement and subtle implication that external approval had been necessary for legitimacy. "The partnership has accelerated our growth timeline," I corrected gently, "but the business model was viable before their investment. We had already achieved profitable operations and market recognition independently." These small recalibrations, acknowledging the value of what I had built while maintaining appropriate boundaries around narratives that diminished that accomplishment, characterized our evolving family dynamic. Not perfect transformation, but gradual movement toward more authentic exchange. By August, Hearth and Home had expanded into a larger production facility to accommodate growing wholesale demand. The workshop team had tripled in size, with specialized roles replacing the generalist approach that had characterized earlier operations. My role had evolved from hands-on production to strategic direction, developing new product lines, establishing sustainability standards, and maintaining design integrity throughout scaling processes. James and I had settled into comfortable rhythm of balancing our professional collaboration with developing personal connection. We maintained clear boundaries between business decisions and relationship dynamics, scheduling specific times for partnership discussions separate from personal interactions. The deliberate separation created space for both dimensions to flourish, without inappropriate blending. The holiday product line projections look strong, James noted during a partnership meeting at the Palmer Group offices, reviewing the wholesale forecasts for Hearth & Home's seasonal offerings. The sustainable gift sets align perfectly with the community integration approach we discussed for the final quarter. The professional exchange remained focused entirely on business considerations despite our personal relationship, evidence of our successful compartmentalization. Later that evening, over dinner at his apartment, we shifted completely into personal connection, discussing books we had recently shared and planning a weekend hiking trip. September brought the formal opening of the Palmer Group's first completed, sustainable community homes, with Hearth & Home products featured prominently in the kitchens and storage systems. At the launch event, standing beside James as potential homebuyers explored the model residences, I experienced profound satisfaction seeing my products integrated into larger sustainability solutions. "This is what you envisioned all along, isn't it?" James asked quietly, observing my expression as visitors examined the bamboo storage systems and commented on their functionality. "Your products becoming essential components of sustainable living rather than isolated eco-friendly objects." His perception was accurate. From the beginning, my vision for Hearth & Home had extended beyond individual product sales to systemic change in how people integrated sustainability into daily life. The Palmer partnership had accelerated this vision's realization, creating context where our products functioned as integral elements of comprehensive sustainable living solutions. "It's validation of the approach," I acknowledged. "Sustainability that's accessible and practical rather than precious or performative. These homebuyers aren't environmental activists making sacrifices for their values. They're ordinary people attracted to beautiful, functional spaces that happen to be sustainable." The observation captured what had driven my product development. From the beginning, creating sustainability solutions that appealed to mainstream consumers through functionality and aesthetics, rather than merely environmental virtue signaling. Seeing this vision physically manifested in the model homes represented profound professional validation. That evening, as the launch event concluded, Richard and Eleanor Palmer approached James and me with evident satisfaction about the development's successful introduction. "Hearth & Home products received the most visitor inquiries," Eleanor noted, reviewing the feedback data collected during the event, particularly the modular storage systems and food preservation solutions. Several potential buyers specifically mentioned sustainability features as primary purchase motivators. The market validation reinforced our partnership's mutual benefit, Hearth & Home products enhancing the development's sustainability credentials, while the residential context showcased our products' practical application in integrated living environments. As we prepared to leave, Richard surprised me with unexpected personal acknowledgement. "You've built something remarkable, Olivia. Not just commercially successful, but genuinely meaningful. We're pleased to have both the business partnership and the personal connection through James." The comment represented complete inversion of my previous experience with the Palmers. From being incorrectly introduced to them through Rebecca's misrepresentation to being valued authentically for what I had actually created. The transformation had unfolded over just 6 months since that catalytic Sunday dinner confrontation. Driving home that evening with James, I reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had emerged from that painful family confrontation. By finally defending what I had built against appropriation, I had inadvertently created conditions for multiple authentic connections: professional partnership based on genuine value recognition, personal relationship founded on mutual respect, and evolving family dynamics with potential for greater authenticity. "You're quiet," James observed as we neared my apartment. "Tired from the event?" "Reflective," I corrected, thinking about how differently everything might have unfolded if I hadn't finally stood up for myself at that dinner. He considered this thoughtfully. "The confrontation was inevitable at some point. Rebecca presenting your business as her own creation was bound to be discovered eventually. Perhaps the family dinner setting was actually optimal, painful but contained, with immediate consequences rather than prolonged deception." The perspective offered useful reframing of what I had experienced as relationship catastrophe. Perhaps the confrontation hadn't been relationship destruction, but necessary recalibration, painful but essential for creating conditions where authentic connection could potentially develop. "The ripple effects have been remarkable," I acknowledged, "far beyond what I could have anticipated in that moment." "That's often true of authentic action," James observed. "When you finally advocate for your genuine worth, professionally or personally, it creates space for relationships based on reality rather than accommodation." The insight captured something essential about my journey since that Sunday dinner: confrontation. By refusing to participate any longer in dynamics that required my diminishment, I had created possibility for connections that honored rather than erased my authentic self. The professional success, evolving family relationships, and developing personal connection with James were all, in different ways, products of that fundamental shift in self-advocacy. As we arrived at my apartment, James turned to me with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I've been meaning to ask you something. The Palmer Group is sponsoring a sustainability conference in Vancouver next month. I'm presenting our integration approach with Hearth and Home as a case study. I was hoping you might consider attending with me, extending the trip for a few days to explore the city together afterward." The invitation represented natural progression in our relationship, public acknowledgement of our connection beyond business partnership, shared travel experience, and dedicated time together away from our respective professional demands. Despite the comfort and ease that had developed between us over recent months, the prospect created unexpected flutter of nervous anticipation. "I'd like that," I replied simply. His smile suggested equal parts relief and pleasure at my response. "Perfect. I'll send you the details tomorrow." As I entered my apartment that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Heard the development launch went well today. Congratulations on the partnership success." The simple acknowledgement of my professional achievement, offered without qualification or comparison, represented continued evolution in our relationship. 6 months earlier, such acknowledgement would have been impossible, either absent entirely or delivered with subtle undermining. The change wasn't dramatic transformation, but incremental progress toward healthier interaction patterns. I texted, "Thank you. Means a lot. Coffee next week?" Her immediate response came with unexpected warmth. "Absolutely. Lots to catch up on." Setting down my phone, I moved to the kitchen to make tea, passing the wall where I had hung the original Hearth and Home product sketches from 5 years earlier, bamboo storage solutions and beeswax food wraps that had evolved from tentative concepts to market-validated products. The framed designs represented tangible evidence of creation's journey from isolation to integration, from dismissed hobby to respected enterprise. The confrontation at Sunday dinner 6 months earlier had been painful, but necessary catharsis, breaking established patterns that had constrained authentic expression and connection. By defending what I had created against appropriation, I had paradoxically created conditions for something new to emerge, not just professionally, but in multiple relationship domains. The ripple effects continued unfolding. Partnership expansion, evolving family dynamics, developing personal connection. What had initially seemed like relationship destruction had actually been the essential first step toward relationship transformation, creating possibility for connections based on genuine recognition rather than strategic positioning or family obligation. As I sipped my tea, I reflected on the fundamental truth that had emerged from this 6-month journey. Defending your creation isn't selfish. It's necessary for anything authentic to flourish. By finally advocating for the value of what I had built, I had created space for relationships that honored rather than diminished that value. The painful confrontation had ultimately been the catalyst for the most genuine connections I had experienced in years. The realization brought unexpected peace, not because every relationship had been perfectly transformed, but because authentic foundation had been established for whatever might develop going forward. The Sunday dinner that had seemed like ending had actually been beginning, the necessary disruption that created possibility for building something real. Vancouver in October offered perfect autumn clarity, crisp air, vibrant foliage, and spectacular mountain views across the harbor. The sustainability conference that had brought us to the city occupied the first 3 days of our trip, with James presenting our integration case study to industry leaders and environmental innovators. Sitting in the audience during his presentation, I experienced the unique satisfaction of seeing my work contextualized within larger sustainability frameworks. Hearth and Home positioned not as isolated eco-friendly products, but as essential components of systemic environmental solutions. The partnership between Palmer Sustainable Communities and Hearth and Home exemplifies next-generation integration, James explained to the attentive audience, gesturing toward slides showing our products installed in model homes. By embedding sustainable alternatives directly into residential environments, we normalize eco-conscious choices rather than positioning them as specialty options. The approach had been my guiding philosophy from Hearth and Home's inception, creating sustainability that felt natural rather than performative, accessible rather than exclusive. Hearing it articulated as innovative business strategy in an international conference setting represented profound evolution from my converted garage workshop beginnings. Following the presentation, I found myself engaged in conversations with potential international partners interested in similar integration approaches. Sustainability developers from Europe, Australia, and Asia exchanged business cards and discussed possible applications of Hearth and Home products within their respective markets. The connections created potential for expansion I had envisioned, but hadn't expected to materialize so quickly. Your products solve the practicality challenge that hampers many sustainability initiatives, noted a Swedish architect specializing in eco-conscious urban housing. They're beautiful and functional first, sustainable second. That's precisely what mainstream adoption requires. The validation from international sustainability experts reinforced what the domestic market had already confirmed. Hearth and Home's approach bridged the critical gap between environmental idealism and practical consumer behavior. By creating products that functioned better than their conventional counterparts, while also offering sustainability benefits, we had developed solutions that appealed beyond committed